Hello ladies and gentlemen, in today's video I want to talk about pull value. Now, to be honest, I've really just ran out of ideas to make HSR content for, and so I'm really digging deep for this one. So please understand that while watching this video. It's not that I'm exactly going to be holding back my opinion. However, that's the reason the uploads recently have been slow. I've always been much more of a quantity over quality guy, and I've ran through basically everything that I enjoy doing. I know a lot of people would be like, yo, just play this, Currency Wars, MOC endgames. I just don't have the passion I used to, right? It's much more fun for me to just talk about my observations with this game than it is to really play it and show it to the world, right? But moving on from that, like, weird ass thing I just went off for, let's talk about pull value. I feel like this is a really good video to make because a lot of the time people call me a quote-unquote hypocrite because I value certain characters higher than others despite similar situations possibly happening to them, right? One of the greatest examples of this on my channel historically is, let's say, a generalist gets power crept out of a teams they were best in slot in. People will be like, oh, why were you so harsh on this niche character getting power crept and you aren't so harsh on the generalist character getting power crept? And this is where pull value comes in, because generalists getting power crept, they really don't give a fuck. There's two other teams that could use that generalist if they're still top of the meta, even if they aren't necessarily the pinnacle of the meta, like for example Rob and SP currently would be, right? So you have two other teams, and then even then, if you are ever going to invest into a new team, there's a high chance that if you don't already have everybody who is best in slot for this team, you will be able to slot in that generalist, and so instantly they have a role again, right? So this is why, while generalists getting power crept does lessen their pull value, it doesn't lessen it anywhere near as much as, let's say, a niche character getting power crept, because the thing with these generalists is they tend to be usable in every team in the game. How usable are niche characters? Usually within their niche, like a Yao Guang, for example. Would you ever use Yao Guang outside of Elation teams when there are other options like M-Blade and Robin SP and Nova Sparkle and upcoming Nova Sunday? Absolutely not, right? You'd never use Yao Guang outside of Elation teams in comparison to how many other options are actually available. So if she ever gets power crept in Elation teams by like future power creep for future generalist supports, she is done, right? She's done for. There's absolutely nowhere else where she has decent value in, even because her generalist buffs are simply way too low, even compared to some much older supports. So they're done. That's where they stop. You just can't really get value out of them anymore unless they receive a Nova. See, that is the difference between the generalists and the niche characters, and this should also help you get a feel of pull value, right? Now, pull value, of course, also changes depending on the context. This is one context. However, there's another context of how valuable is this pull with the characters that I own on my account and the vertical investment that I have on my account. This is usually the question that I get spammed the most as someone who is a meta content creator, where people ask me, how valuable is this character? How, is this character really a must pull for my account? And I always have to answer the exact same. The objective answer is nobody's a must pull, and the subjective answer is I can't answer it because I don't know the characters you have on your account. So if I really care enough to actually help someone out, I will tell them, let me know what characters and teams you have with their investment, and this will give me a much better idea as to what's a actually high value pull, right? A great example of this, using like recent meta stuff, is Robin SP. Everybody knows Robin SP. She's best in slot in so many teams now. So strong. Great early vertical investment. And most notably, she can replace Cyrene in Cassie Mono Rem. And for a lot of people, she will be better at E0 than Cyrene for Cassie Mono Rem, right? So, if you have a E0 S0 Cyrene, and then you have like E0 S1 Cassie, E0 S1 Evernight, and E0 S1 Hyacine, it'd obviously be worth it to get Robin SP. She's better than Cyrene, right? Wrong, because there is a better pull value, quote unquote, on this mono rem team. You have things like E1 Hyacine. You have things like E1 Evernight. These two Eidolons will likely bring you much more into increasing the total team's damage than pulling a Robin SP to replace Cyrene. However, once again, depending on the context, things change. What if you have a second Amphoreus team that would love to have Cyrene freed up so that you can take advantage of them? Now, the pull value thing entirely changes. Before, if you only had one team that really needed Cyrene, it's obvious you go for more optimal vertical investment on good stuff like E1 Evernight and E1 Hyacine. But let's say you have a Anoxa, let's say you have a Mayday, let's say you have a Eggy, and they all want Cyrene, and the alternative options are all bad for them. Now, it is probably better to get Robin SP because you free up the Cyrene in order to boost a second team while also slightly boosting your main team with just one pull of E0 Robin SP. So, this is pull value. It changes depending on the context of many people's accounts. You can try your best to try and use it objectively, but 99% of the time it comes down to subjectivity and the context of someone's account, right? What investment they have, what characters they have, what teams do they already have finished, how many pulls do they maybe have available. A lot of things change how worth it getting something is in HSR. Now, a little bit more of a biased opinion on is it so much pull value? A little bit in the literal sense is Lycomb banners. For those people who don't know, you don't watch me that much, I do have a bit of a grudge with Lycomb banners in HSR currently, where I feel like their value is incredibly low and it's much better pull value to always use it on character banners than to use it on Lycomb banners, right? Now, the only version 4 character this doesn't really apply to is Himiko. Himiko's Lycomb jump is just completely disgusting. And in pair with other defense shred ampers, yeah, that Lycomb is the strongest jump in the entirety of the game. So there's no excuse I can really use. It's a great pull. However, the reason I say this is that we are now in an age where quite consistently, even the E1 is a better investment than S1. This actually used to be a thing where S1s were consistently the best, like, one cost investment extra on top of a character that you could get over their E1, right? This was pretty consistent for quite a while until recently. Now it is much more normalized for a ton of characters to get a bigger jump from their E1 than they do their S1, right? Why is it that, in my opinion, this matters? It means that in 99% case scenarios these days, you can just go for the E1 and you'd actually be getting more out of the pulls you're putting in than you would out of an S1. Once again, Himiko is basically the only exception to this with how strong her Lycomb is. However, Himiko's E1 is also still incredibly strong and competitive with her Lycomb, right? But let's say you go into the Lycomb banner and you lose the 75-25. You guys really need to keep in mind, this is not WUWA's weapon banner, like some other games' weapon banners, where it is guaranteed. You still have a chance to lose on this banner. And just think about getting a guarantee for a Lycomb of all things instead of a character, right? If you lose let's say on Himiko, you're trying to pull Himiko, you're going for the E1, you lose the 50-50. That sucks. Now, you can use this guarantee on other upcoming meta characters like Robin SP. Maybe you can even take advantage of a Sunday Nova if that's something coming in 4.6 or 4.7. Maybe you can grab new sustained Nihilux since you weren't able to get her E1. If you lose on a light cone banner, the only thing you can guarantee is another light cone, which most of the time isn't anywhere near as valuable as getting certain characters' eidolons or as getting newer characters to fill in slots for your teams, right? On top of this, these Lycone banners don't give you 4-star characters, so you might be fooled by the fact that this banner is 10 less hard pity than the character banner. But the thing is, if you've been a active enough player and you have a majority of your 4 stars actually E6'd, the pull return from the character banner will lead to it actually being similar in terms of how many pulls needed to get a 5-star to the Lycone banner. Since in the Lycone banner you can only get Lycones that are 4-star, and the most you can get, I believe, is like 8 Starlight for every 4-star, while one 4-star character that's maxed will give you an entire pullback, right? So that is pull value. It can be described and used in a lot of ways. However, the most simple definition I could use is pull value is subjective, right? It is something that changes depending on the context of someone's account and, to be honest, anybody. Because the thing is, how valuable is a meta pull to someone who prefers pulling for characters they simply like? And in this case scenario, this also changes pull value. It's an ever-changing, term depending on the person actually trying to use it. It's never the same for everybody. And so this is why it's important to not to just see things at face value. Once again, like people have with me with the generalist versus niche support thing, it's not the same if a generalist support gets power crept as a niche support getting power crept. The loss in value is much more steep for one of them than the other, at least in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Hope you all have a great day. Hope you all have a great night. And peace out.